He's going to die.
Exactly, yeah, he's referring to Branson on that.
Yes.
Well, I'll give you this. So the question is, everybody had their own COVID experience, and mine was that I worked for the TV industry for 30 years, performing in front of audiences, warming up for sitcoms, starting off on Golden Girls, Designing Women, Wings, Perfect Strangers, a lot of them. But with COVID, there were no audiences. They just shut everything down. And I just tell everybody, God knew before I did that this was going to happen. And that's part of of my story. Everybody's story is that God is ahead of you. You don't realize it. You're praying, God, what's happening? What's going on? But my story was, I did a CD, and I put it on Sirius Radio. And I'm a comedian. Musicians get residuals for songs,
Yes.
but comedians never did. Well, Sirius Radio started paying us residuals. And so I gave my latest CD to Sirius in September. It took 6 months. COVID hit in March. I started getting residuals in April. And I just tell everybody, God knew before anybody did that COVID was going to happen, and he prepared my story, prepared a lot. So what has happened is that my wife has a third of my income, my residuals have a third of my income, and doing stand-up comedy has built up the rest. We started off slow, but now it's built up, so now I'm going back around the country and doing what I did many, many years ago. And so it's fun, it's exciting, and no, I don't know if I'll ever do another TV show. It may happen, but I don't know. So what has happened, you ask? God's in charge. And so I will just go to the next, okay, what's going to happen now? But we're at the exact same spot, have the exact amount of money when COVID started. And that to me is just a miracle of all miracles. We didn't lose anything. It's the exact same spot. So, it's not a lot of money, let me just tell you. But somehow at the sustaining level of it.
Send me those cards and letters.
Is the sound okay? Am I popping too much? Should I adjust this, or is this all right? Are you okay? Take it down a little bit? Because I seem to be popping there. It's just, okay, better or worse? I'll just be like the optometrist. Better or worse? There we go. All right, the question for everybody here today is, if God is real, the God I just talked about, then why can't we see him? Why does he hide himself? Doesn't he care? How am I supposed to believe in him if he doesn't show himself? I say that this culture is like the state of Missouri. It's the show me state. You know, if we can't see it, if we can't measure it, if
You're
we
not
can't.
supposed to know about Missouri yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me cross that off my notes then. I'm very sorry I put that in.
Not until you're ready to die,
Oh,
Branson.
Oh, goodness.
it's a callback. For those online, you have to understand my story. We'll redo this. All right.
Yep.
I put it to you that I believe that God is around us every single day in every single way, but we're just too blind, too unaware, possibly too dense to see it. My wife sees God in nature. Maybe that hits some of you, and you're that person. So, you know, chirping bird in a tree, wind in her hair, a summer storm. I believe that nature is out to kill us. So I disagree on that one, but that's okay. She has her things. That's what she likes. Other people see God in the birth of a child, medical miracles, a parking spot at Christmas. I have people who just believe in God. I found a spot, God is alive. I see God, and that's what today's talk about. I see him in art. I see God in music, be it a painting, sculpture. Art transcends our normal, dull life, and it makes us look at, I think, life in a different way. So I believe that if God did make us, it's not too far of a stretch to believe that he put his imprint on our hearts. And whenever we see something that rings true, it should remind us of him. And it's a way for us to call, it's a way for him to call to us before we even know him. And when we do know him, remind us who he is. So there are certain pieces of art that transcend human achievement. I don't know if you've been to Italy. We're just talking to people who are going over there, and Michelangelo's David, it's just, to me, every time I see a picture of it, I've never seen it live, but it's just amazing. And if you know the story of Michelangelo, it's like, how do you carve these things? He goes, well, I just imagine a horse and I just chip away everything that's not horse. And I just love that quote. It's just fantastic. But David is just, it was a crap piece of marble, and he took it and he made it into one of the greatest pieces of art that's out there. And then there's Rembrandt's The Prodigal. My wife has that in her office.
Yes.
And she changed the painting to make it her face on every single one for a talk that she did, because she sees herself in every single role there. And then Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. And people don't know of his history, what a Christian he was, but then when he drew and painted this Starry Night, the church, all the lights are out, and there's just such a comment on society at that time. So there, to me, it just, when you see great art, it just makes you go, okay, there's something bigger here. And now we had music this morning. I think music does this. Somehow music stirs our emotions, it touches us. Everyone here, I know, has a song, think about it, that makes you cry. A song that makes you want to dance, a song that takes you back to your childhood. Well, who do you think invented music? I think it's a way for God to communicate with us on a subconscious level. I just have, and it soothes. That's just a wonderful, I don't know how you were raised, but my dad loved Eddie Arnold. Anybody remember that name, Eddie Arnold? So, after a hard day, my dad would, I don't know, I'll probably cry at this. He would turn off the lights, and he would just sit in the dark, and he would listen to Eddie Arnold's Cattle Call, if you remember this song. And it was just such a wonderful song, and I just remember him doing that. And so when I got the new iPod from Apple, and it has 4 million songs, the first song I called up, I have a hard time, he's gone now, obviously, and I just pulled up Cattle Call, and it just made me cry. Just sat on the couch and just cried. So how does that happen? There's something divine in music that stirs us, and I think he gives that to us. So now, here's just a fun story. We all know when music works. We hear it and we know, okay, these notes work in this time and in this pattern. A group of scientists put a group of people from all different nationalities in a room, and they asked them to listen to Beethoven's Fifth. You probably heard bum 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 bum. But these scientists cut up the music and they put it in a different order. And so people listened to it and they said, no, and people had never heard the song. They didn't know Beethoven, they were from all different nationalities. They said, no, that doesn't sound right. And so then the scientists played it back in the correct order. They went, oh, no, that's the right one. That's it right there. That's the way it should be. Somehow, music transcends language and culture, and we know it's right in music, because I think God imprinted that on our hearts. He says, this is the way I'm going to call to you with this kind of music. This is sorrowful, this is exciting, and this is something that you will be able to see me in. We are attracted to beauty, magnificence, spectacle. We're repulsed by squalor, filth, and things out of order. I don't know about you, but this doesn't happen to anybody but animals. I don't see dogs, it doesn't only happen to humans, it doesn't happen to animals. Dogs do not sit around listening to Hound Dog and go, boy, that takes me back, that really takes me back. It's just, I think music is a way for God to communicate to his children. We're here today because I believe that stories do the exact same thing. It's another way for God to call us, to let us know that he's there. That when a story has the correct structure, it feels right. And when there's not a good structure and it doesn't echo God's story, then somehow it's wrong, it falls flat. And so that's my big claim this morning, that every story you hear that works echoes God's story. That's the big ta-da, if there is one today. The Bible is the blueprint for every single good story you've ever heard. If you have a favorite movie or book, Star Wars, Harry Potter, whatever it is, I guarantee you, the plot follows the Bible beat for beat. Maybe you already know this is just a common fact, but the stories that resonate with us, they resonate because they reflect his story. And so that, I love the idea that besides being a great introduction to God and his plans for us, the Bible is at its core one story. And maybe you've never thought about that, but whether consciously or not, we try to emulate that story when we tell our own stories. So for you authors from the film festival, it could be a very depressing fact that you now know that no matter what you come up with, no matter what genius idea you have, if it doesn't follow the Bible, it will fall flat. You ever left a story and went, that didn't work for me. I don't know what happened. There was just something wrong. And I guarantee you, it's because it didn't follow the beats of the Bible. Sorry. Every pattern, every story worth telling follows a direct pattern. How many of you thought that the three-act show was invented by your high school drama director? Okay, you're wrong. Okay, so I just find it fascinating that though the Bible is made up of all these hundreds of different stories, it's all part of one fabric that tells the compelling story of God chasing after his children. So every once in a while you got to step back and look for the forest for the trees and see what it really is. Now, like every good novel, the Bible has action, adventure, intrigue, jealousy, death, betrayal, and some good old-fashioned humor. How many think the Bible's funny? If you didn't raise your hand, you're wrong. Okay, so I don't have time to unpack all the jokes within, but the Bible runs the full spectrum of comedy, from exaggeration to irony to sarcasm to downright crude jokes. And why not? Because God invented humor. When Jesus mocks the person who can see the speck in their neighbor's eye, but can't see the tree in their own eye, he's exaggerating. It's a form of Chinese exaggeration. He was telling a joke. I just tell people you don't get the attention of masses of people without throwing a couple one-liners in there. The miracles helped. Okay, fine. So, while everyone will acknowledge that the Bible tells God's story, what's been under our collective noses the entire time is that every successful story, again, is an echo of his divine story. And that is the genius of God. What better way to draw people to him? If you're God and you're planning things out, it's like, how about if I tell them story after story after story after story, so that when they hear my story, they go, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. And that's why God put all these predictions throughout the Old Testament, so that when Jesus showed up, they would say, oh, you're familiar. You fulfilled all these predictions that have been told to us from the beginning of time. This is what we've been searching for our entire lives. This is the best setup and payoff. As a comedian, I so appreciate God's intelligence. It goes, you just set everything up, and now you paid it all off. You're just a genius. I love it. We're like the monster in Frankenstein that's drawn to that music. You know how he goes, and he follows it? That's us. That's who we are. So, what is the theology of story? And that's what the topic of today's talk. How many here just don't like stories? There's always somebody who goes, I don't like stories, I don't like theater, I don't like movies. Well, if you're drawn to sporting events, I think we have a few Eagles fans here. So that quite possibly you're drawn to stories. It's like, okay, it's two competitors coming into a field and they're fighting each other, and I know the characters, I know who they are, this is the underdog, and you definitely want one side to win, I know that. But it's like gladiators it's David and Goliath, without the messy cleanup after. Billy Wilder is a famous director, did Some Like It Hot. He broke everything down to three basic elements for a good story. Act 1, send your hero up a tree. Act 2, set the tree on fire. Act 3, get your hero out of the tree. That's story. That's all it is. It comes down to that. It's simple. So even if you're not a student of drama, you know the ingredients of a good story. A beginning, a middle, and end. Okay, it's a no-brainer. You hook the audience, you bring in the action, you make a squirm as you watch the characters stumble through narrative, then eventually you wrap everything up with a great bow. I grew up watching Westerns on TV. I'm of that age. In the 60s, it was all Westerns and cop shows like that. Like, how many ever saw the FBI? Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. This is an education for all of you. He was in the FBI. Every single show was the exact same thing. We watched it every single week. It was a Quinn Martin production. And he would chase people, and at the end there'd be a shootout, and the criminals would be in their hideout, and Ephraim Zimbalist would hide behind his car door, always behind his car door. And he would stand up, from the sponsor, exactly. And he would stand up, and he would shoot once, and one bullet would ricochet and kill them all. And so that was, but every single week it always happened. And the story, we knew the story. We knew what was going to happen. But boy, oh boy, did I love that. It was classic TV. I grew up on those stories, Bonanza and everything else. 5 basic beats. We're pulling back a little bit. We're starting to break this down. 5 basic beats of every story. Number 1, it's called balance. And start thinking of the Bible as I talk about this. This is where this story establishes this is normal. Unbalanced. Wouldn't you know it? Something happens to upset the normal world. Then there's a quest. Our hero goes and does something to restore the balance. Then there's a crisis. Something happens to prevent the hero's plan from working. All is lost. And finally, number 5, the new balance. The happy ending is established. The balance is restored. So any story you've ever heard, from Jaws to Star Wars to The Wizard of Oz, they follow these same beats. but I hope you also recognize the story of the Bible. This is the greatest story ever told. Big step back. The Bible starts off with balance. Big surprise, that's Eden. All was right with the world. It wasn't a word, paradise. Personally, I don't know how any self-respecting paradise could do without luau's, but they didn't do that at that time. So you have Adam and Eve. They're naked. They're having a great time. They're frolicking with the animals. They're lounging around in waterfalls. No worries, no danger, no tan lines. Okay, it's paradise. That's what he created for us. And it's important you remember the paradise from which we came, because the goal is to get back to paradise. That's where God is saying, this is how life is supposed to be. This is what you should miss. So, you have paradise. What happens in every single story? It's called the inciting incident. This is also known as the catalyst. This is a whole new ballgame. Jaws swims up to this idyllic town. Mary Poppins floats down in her umbrella. There's always an inciting incident. Something comes to upset the balance. We know what this is. This is Satan. He enters the picture, and he is not in charge. He's upset. He waits till Adam is off naming some animals, maybe, going off doing an errand, and he starts messing with Eve's mind, and he plays his tricks. And there's always the trickster, and he starts telling Eve, did God really say that? Did he really say this? And so then she eats the apple, and you know that Adam then eats it, and then he blames her, and it's a big thing. So what we have is the fall happens, they don't have a thing to wear, and we go from normal into the great unknown after the inciting incident. Story-wise, our epic tale moves into what we call the big event. God stays true to his word. He has to kick the tenants out of the garden. He throws a couple curses at them. And now the hero is forced to leave his old life and go on a journey. I want you to know the hero is not Adam and Eve. The hero is God. And God now has to pursue his love. And his love are the two people that he kicked out. And he has to find a way to get them back to the garden. And that's called the big event. So even though he kicked humanity to the curb for their disobedience, he now starts a very long, arduous journey to get back to his true love. What does he do? He introduces himself to Abraham and becomes his God. He begins weaving a lot of foreshadowing about his son, the coming Savior, throughout the Old Testament. And this is where we see this long quest. It's called the quest to restore that relationship with humanity. This takes us to Act 2. Where our hero tries various ways to restore the balance. We've got judges, you've got prophets, nothing is working. A new tactic is needed, and this you'll see in every single story you'll ever hear. It leads us to the story's midpoint pinch, right in the middle of your story. What happens? This is where it gets personal. This is where the hero realizes, I got to do something different. I can't just keep doing what I've been doing. So I'm going to insert myself into the story. I'm going to double down. I am going to do an all or nothing attempt to win. This is the event we call Christmas.
Yes.
This is Christmas. The Nativity is God breaking through into our time and space. The hero knows the only way to restore the broken relationship is to get in there and fix it himself. This little baby coming in is the one who created us. And so he's through telling us who he is, he's now going to show us who he is. And that is, again, the genius of God and the love of God. And we all know this. But with all good stories, it's not going the way we think it should go. We think think of the Israelis. They thought that he was going to be, the Messiah is going to come back and get rid of the Romans. It's like, that'll happen. But this is the way I'm going to tell the story. And so he comes in as the little babe, a king who's come to die for his people. At every midpoint pinch, there's always a thing called a temptation. Always happens in every single story. There's an escape clause. And this is where the hero is tempted to give up. So, think of the big story. You've got baby Jesus. They escape death. They go to Egypt. They come back. And Jesus starts his ministry. And when he does it, he is tempted by Satan again to give it all up. I will give you these things if you just stop and let me be king. And Jesus does what Adam and Eve couldn't do. He resists. He rebuffs Satan's temptation, and now you're set for a battle. You know the conflict is happening, and it's going to come to a head pretty soon. Takes a while, like with every good story. Jesus starts his ministry, and it takes a little while. He goes out and doesn't happen right away. Good stories take their time. Jesus takes a few years to establish himself as the Messiah, and he knows what's happening. But as you read the Bible, you know all his disciples totally clueless. Even to the point where Judas says, this is not going the way I think it should go. I'm going to push this along a little bit and make sure that I'm going to betray you so that you'll reveal who you really are. And of course, it didn't go the way he had wanted it to go. We arrive at what's known as the crisis. In film school, secular film school out in Hollywood, they ask us, what is the crisis of the Bible? And we all kind of sat around, kind of looking at each other. One hand went up, the crucifixion? He goes, yes. So even if you're not religious, everybody knows what the crucifixion is. That's called the crisis. This is where everything goes wrong. In classic terms, the crisis cannot go well for the hero. Every single story you've ever seen, he must lose. He must die. In movies and novels, the death can be metaphorical. It could be a near death. But in the big story, our hero dies. Dead as a doornail, there's no way back. This is it. It's over. And now we have to wait. Because otherwise, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Is the story over? And you know every story you see like that, you just get depressed. You go, oh, there's no way they're going to get back for this. You don't get to the climax right away. You don't come to the answer. You have a thing called the wafer beat. This is where, in the Bible, it's the Saturday after crucifixion. This is where all the hero's friends experience the sense of loss. They fear for their lives. They wonder what they could have done to prevent it. There's sorrow, there's guilt, and of course there's fear. They think that the Romans are going to come in and capture them. So the weight of the crisis has to hit home. It was a long journey. We feel cheated because now it's over. The good guy's lost. I want my money back. But wait, he's only mostly dead. Now, in real life, Jesus was really, really dead. Okay, but our story purposes, we have to know the hero has something up his sleeve. We have hope. What is Jesus' trick? He can defeat death. Nobody knew that, but that's what he can do. In The Princess Bride, remember this, Wesley says, true love never dies. It can only be delayed. I love that quote. I don't know if screenwriter William Goldman knew the perfect resurrection that he was describing, but he may have had an inkling because his story fits these beats. Finally, after what feels like years, we come to the showdown of the story. The good guy faces the bad guy, and the winner takes all in the climax. The climax is, in a good story, that our hero wins. Surprisingly, the Bible's climax happens off screen. We don't see it. Jesus defeats death off screen, and all we see are people running around going, dude, he's not there. I have no idea. I don't know where he is. The stone's been rolled away. I don't know what happened. Against all odds, the hero has come back from the dead. He wins. Jubilation parades the talk show circuit. Okay. Now, here's the problem. We're in this story. And so we don't see what happens because we're stuck in it. The story is over. The climax happens. And what happens next is called the denouement. It is the new paradise, the return to paradise. But again, in God's story, it takes a long time to get there. He has his own reason for doing it. He wants to bring as many people into his kingdom as possible. But this is where a newer, better paradise is found. This is the new heaven, or what the Bible calls the New Jerusalem. So after all this time, after everything that's happened, the hero and his loved ones, now in the billions, are reunited. All is forgiven. Old wounds are forgotten. It's a new day. Our hero enters the new, much improved paradise, sits back, puts his feet up, and tells his children the timeless story from the very beginning. There's a lot of conflict in the middle of it. There's a lot of rising action, but then it's going to happen. And the reason we believe this ending is that everything else in the story has come true. So don't lose heart. That denouement, that new paradise is coming, and he has guaranteed what it's going to be. So we should be so happy that we believe in the one who wins. Paradise will be regained. It's a foregone conclusion. You can bet your life on it. Now God gives the ending away. We already know what's going to happen. This is from Revelation 21, 1 through 6. Behold, there is a new heaven, a new earth, and a new city, where the river of life flows, where the tree of life bears fruit in every season. Remember the tree of life? It was there in the first paradise. It always has to come back in the second paradise, a new and improved one. This heaven, this city, this river, this tree are a vision of your life reborn, restored, and renewed. Thanks be to God. Everything that was lost in the fall will be restored better than ever in the new heaven. That is our blessed assurance, that the God of heaven, who made everything we see, everything we can't see, had a plan from the very beginning. I don't know if this helps you. All you have to do is believe that someone who's infinitely greater than you is working everything out, and he promises that even though we have to go through difficult times, everything will end up exactly the way that he wants. There's no change in it. He's so powerful, there's no way we can get around it. It's not a fairy tale. It's a real story that every other story is based on. Now, for you aspiring filmmakers who came over this weekend to make stories, you now have an advantage. You now know the secret. You just line your story up against the Bible. And all you have to do is follow those beats, and you'll have a good story that will resonate in our hearts. And if it doesn't follow those beats, you can look at it. Oh, I see, there's the problem. I don't have a midpoint pinch. Oh, there's a problem. My crisis is wrong. Just follow the beats of the Bible, and it's so simple. Once you know it, that's how I critique scripts. I read them with this blueprint, if you will. Every time now, for the rest of you, whenever you see a great piece of art, listen to a great song, watch a great movie, read a great book, know that you are really enjoying a reflection, an echo of God's original story. And I don't know if that's comforting to you, but it comforts me to no end that everywhere I look, I see God trying to comfort me, saying, I got this one. I hope it comforts you as well. That's it. Thank you so much. I will say good afternoon. I will turn it back to music. I should have given you more of an advance notice.
Amen.